So now you guys are probably thinking, however, again? So this is our third video on however. It's such an important word, and there's so many ways to use it. It comes up a lot, uh, and I think that to really three-dimensionalize your writing, you want to know how to use however. There are a lot of other words, but this is paramount. So using however as an aside is something that we haven't covered yet. So if you said something like you had a sentence and then however sort of interrupts the flow of that sentence, it would be offset by commas. So let's write this. It is, however, extremely challenging to hold your breath for longer than 5 minutes. Now, so it's offset by commas on either side. And what is the implication? What is the implication? If using however as an aside, right? Because there are other ways to use it. That's our previous two videos on this covered a few of the different ways to use however. This is using it as an aside. What is the implication? Previous dialogue or sentence that connects to this sentence as sort of an obvious follow-up or continuation, right, of those ideas. So you could say something like, my father held his breath for 10 minutes underwater last week at the gym. It is, however, extremely challenging to hold your breath for longer than 5 minutes. Now, to make this even more clear, you might want to add, for most people. And you can also add something sort of interesting, right? So if you say, my father, how old is the person who's writing this? Okay, so my father is going to be generally at least, 20 years older, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. So you might want to point at that, right? So you could say most people at any age. And this phrase could work well for anything that was older or younger, right? So you could say my, 10-year-old son. And then instead of at any age, you could change this for most young people. So if you want to have some clarity and specificity, if it adds to the sentence, it adds to the sort of three-dimensionality of the sentence or sentences, it might not be a bad idea. So, three-dimensionality of the sentences equals a plus, right? So you wanna have details, basically details that add to other details or specifics in the sentence, right? And they're not just random. You're not just like running amok, just adding. For most, you could, like if you said most older people, that wouldn't make sense, right? Because you're talking about your 10-year-old son. So, but if you said, my father held his breath for 10 minutes underwater last week at the gym. It is, however. So it's pretty clear, underwater last week at the gym. But obviously he's at the pool in the gym. So you could say, if you wanted to make it super clear, you could call it the gym pool, right? Because it's super taut. It's only two words. You could also say at the pool in the gym, right? But I think it sounds better if you just said at the gym pool. You could also say the gym's pool, but it seems a little bit excessive. Like you don't really need that apostrophe there. I think the gym pool, it flows, right? So my father held his breath for 10 minutes underwater last week at the gym pool. It is, however, extremely challenging for most older people to hold your breath for longer than 5 minutes. Now, obviously, here's where you would, talk about the differences between, holding your breath as a younger person versus older person, right? That's like the natural future sentence. You want to address that because there's, if you're gonna introduce a specific demographic, then you want to answer obvious questions, right? You want to answer the reader's obvious natural questions. As the reader goes along, if you don't answer those questions, then you might be pointing them down the wrong path. So here's, if you do not answer those questions, you might be, pointing the reader down the wrong path, and sharing the wrong, focus, details, etc. Right, in your writing. So if you're not going to talk about the difference between holding your breath, so let's just say a younger person. Well, most younger people, there was a study that was done. Most younger people can hold their breath for, up to 8 minutes. Between this age and this age, I don't know what the stats are, but if there's no difference, if it's like, well, human beings in general are pretty much flat. Like someone who's 12, I doubt it, but let's just say, for example, someone who's 12, they generally, who's relatively healthy, etc., they generally can hold their breath the same as someone who's 62. Then you would just change this to most people. And then you could talk about the specifics of, the demographics, and why, people at any age, with the same general health, hold their breath for a similar amount of time. And this is the maximum, obviously, right? But the max. And this is just an example, obviously. So, but if you said most older people, it is, however, extremely challenging for most older people to hold your breath for longer than 5 minutes, then you want to talk about the differences between how someone younger can hold their breath for generally up to 8 minutes or 10 minutes. But most, once you pass 35 or 45 at the same relative health level, this study or whatnot shows that, you're losing a minute for each decade, right? So like, so I mean, like, I don't know. So, but basically you want to have sort of salient, relevant descriptive points. So that's, I think, really important. And so this obviously would continue, in the subsequent sentences here. You would want to clarify, right? Now, if you wanted this to, and really no matter what, I mean, especially since whatever the venue is, you're writing a description, right? And you're introducing a topic, and hopefully you're developing that topic, and you're sort of an expert, right? So you want to say, oh, there was this study and that study, and so that's helpful. But just in general, this is a good 2-sentence block, right? My father held his breath for 10 minutes underwater last week at the gym pool. Period. It is, however, extremely challenging for most older people to hold your breath for longer than 5 minutes. And obviously, we will develop, other specifics, like perhaps, how old the father is, how long the son or daughter, who is the speaker or the writer, held his or her breath, underwater, like as a max, right? And we're assuming that it was longer. That record was longer than the father. So I mean, you want to make sure that everything sort of points to the same argument and sort of the same direction. And if it doesn't, then you want to go back and proofread. This is why proofreading is so crucial, because when you're looking for that logic, we talked about that before. Make sure that there is logic. There is a logical flow to your writing. And that it's clear, right? So we want it to be clear, but we're making the reader work a little bit, right? So let's do one more. So, however, can also mean by whatever means. So let's set this up. By whatever means, or to whatever extent. So you could say, however the evidence was analyzed, it was blatantly obvious that the prime suspect was guilty, right, of the crime. You could also say it was blatantly obvious the prime suspect was guilty of the crime, however the evidence was analyzed. Now, personally, I like, and hopefully you guys like, this first one better. It just seems clearer. You're not quite as confused because you have to like read it twice. Oh, however the evidence was analyzed. I mean, I think this is a close second. I think this is still clean. It's good grammar. But I think the first one is ideal because you're keeping this separated. You're allowing the reader to think, oh, so however the evidence was analyzed. So in whatever way the evidence was analyzed. And, we're assuming that in this whatever the venue is that the sentence shows up in, that the writer is going to sort of shed some interesting light on analyzing evidence, in this time period or whatever time period that they're talking about. Maybe it's some cold case, or potentially it's a new case where there's a lot of new technology. So you want to be interesting, right? And that's another. It fits. It's the same thing, but it's really important to remember that. Be interesting. Don't be boring. Do not be boring. People hate boring. So if you want to share relevant details and make sure the reader is engaged. It's not a guarantee, but you want to try to make sure the reader is engaged, and that's why really proofreading, making sure you have really good connective sentences and words, and varying the sentence structure, varying the punctuation, etc. This stuff is super helpful, and words like however, I think, are paramount to being able to understand how to use as resources, as tools to improve the quality of your writing. So I'm going to, and this bracket means you could include it or you could not include it, but it's still a clean sentence. Obviously, you're going to follow up, and add relevant detail after these. But I think both of these are great. By whatever means the evidence was analyzed, to whatever extent the evidence was analyzed, it was blatantly obvious that the prime suspect was guilty of the crime, or that the prime suspect was guilty, period. It's got the dun-dun-dun. Or you could say this, again, I like this better because it allows the reader to think about this phrase. Oh yeah, however the evidence was analyzed. comma. It was blatantly obvious. I just think it sounds a little bit better. And then obviously this one, however, using it as an aside. Thank you very much.